so much of what I do is informed by what I have done for the last 35 years, which is acting. To prepare a script is you should see my scripts. They're just nothing but questions all the way around. What was she doing before this moment? Before the cameras start rolling, what's the moment before? What happens afterwards? Why is she crossing the room? Why is she holding a cup? What's in the cup? I've reacted as this to some degree. Totally. I am certainly not unique in interrogating a script. I've also written enough scripts, myself too, to know that a script is a haiku. It is the most distilled form. And what's there on the page is a reduction, a jus of a giant stockpot. But the ghost of all those previous drafts has to be in you. Because it can't be on the page, or the script would be, 60 hours long.
Hey, I'm Jon.
I'm Cory.
And this is The Passage,
the podcast where authors break down their favorite pieces of writing,
taking you behind the scenes from the first spark of inspiration
to the final edits and everything in between.
About a week after I finished reading Wifehouse, our guest today, Sonya Walger's gorgeously textured, slightly nerve-wracking, really beautiful new novel. I happened to start another new book, The Loneliness of Sonya and Sunny, the latest from Kieran Desai. And there's a line in that book that when I read it, it sort of reverberated backwards through something I'd been thinking about while reading Wifehouse. This is going to get a little Inception-y, so bear with me, but I love the way books can sometimes be in conversation with one another inadvertently. Desai is describing one of her main characters, whose name happens to be Sonya, reading Anna Karenina. And she writes, Sonya could barely read Anna Karenina because when she read, a tingling overcame her. She so wished to be writing it herself. What a tingle, an almost unbearable, sublime tingle from head to toe. How many millions of observations and moments it had taken to compose this book. And I definitely had both of those kind of contradictory thoughts swirling in my head as I was reading Wifehouse. On the one hand, there's this like restless inspiration to want to write something as good as what you're reading, like maybe I could do this if I try really hard. And on the other hand, there's the recognition that the writer has brought so much of their own life, their perceptions, their observations to the page that it would take 3 lifetimes to really do it. So I thought it would be fun to have Sonya on today to talk about how observations, life experiences, and maybe even other stories get refracted and repurposed into fiction, about the challenges of inhabiting a really large cast of characters and how to make writing realistic people look easy enough that I can convince myself that maybe I could do it, even though deep down I know that I definitely can't. Sonya Walger is an award-winning author. Her first book, Lion, was published by the New York Review of Books in 2025, and Wifehouse came out earlier this year. She's also the host of a literary podcast called Bookish, and if all that were not enough, she is an actress you may know from a show called Lost, and more recently, Apple TV's For All Mankind. Sonya, we are super happy to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm honestly so delighted to be here. This is such a treat.
Great. So we will start with the passage you have picked. If you could kind of set it up for us so that people know what's going on.
Sure. So this is the book, Wifehouse. It's the story of Annie, who is a housewife and a mother and has been married for quite some time. She's got a teenage daughter and a 9-year-old son. And her husband, Hector, is an actor. And she has lived happily enough in this configuration. And Hector goes away for a job. And Annie finds her life in a more precarious situation than she'd perhaps ever envisaged it. She gets entangled with a French tutor who's a much younger man, who she's been gifted French lessons by her best friend. And this begins in a completely, as I think these things so often do, in a completely neutral way, progresses because of Annie's acute vulnerability, because of other things that happen in her life at this similar moment, combined with Hector's absence, to render her very, very susceptible to the charms of this. He's not a kid, but he's much, much younger. And it is bewildering to her and completely reconfiguring to her sense of self. It is a book about identity and what happens to a woman, arguably a human, when in the presence of a family, and how to stay in yourself, whatever that nebulous word might mean, in the presence of others who need things from you.
Hmm.
So I'm going to read you this passage with my appalling light and terrible eyesight. Here we go. I should have back to this one. So Annie's home alone and can't sleep. Hector's in Argentina. She gropes for her phone in the dark, finds a podcast to drown out her thoughts. The host of a news review show tells a story about a group of tourists on a guided tour bus in Iceland who got off at a rest stop to stretch their legs and take in the scenery. One female traveler decided to change her clothes before getting back on the bus. When it was time to leave, the passengers boarded the bus, and one of them alerted the driver that they were missing a passenger, a woman in black who had been sitting by the window. The driver agreed to wait, and they all sat on the bus, patiently awaiting this woman's return. Eventually, when she did not appear, they decided to get out and search for her. The female traveler joined in the search. Local police were summoned, the fire department deployed, all beginning an increasingly frantic search for a missing woman in a black jacket. It was many, many hours before the female traveler realized that she was, in fact, the person for whom they were searching. She informed the authorities, and the search was called off. The host laughs as he tells the story. Annie is wide awake now. She pictures this woman trudging through the tundra, searching for the missing tourist. She wonders how long it took her to realize her mistake. She wonders how long it took her to admit it. Did she hesitate, he wonders? Did she for one wild moment wonder what would happen if she never owned her mistake, but allowed that other self to vanish into the treeless horizon? Did she, for a moment, hover on the threshold of becoming someone new, someone naked, reborn, free? Annie stares at the darkness. She, too, is walking in the wrong direction, knowing full well that she is the one who is missing.
Sonya, I read this passage a few times before we started recording, and I realized that actually the sentence that I find the most interesting is the host laughs as he tells the story. The intentionality that I'm assuming that you wanted to make sure that we understood that this is a story that can be interpreted in different ways. It could be a humorous, funny story, but that there's a bit of a darkness behind it. And sitting in the dark listening to this podcast that I assume is supposed to be a bit of a lighter feel-good story is not how the person listening to it is taking it. And that is the thing that sort of resonated with me each time that I read it, is how much power that one sentence has at the end of that paragraph. I'd love to know why choose this passage.
It's worth just contextualizing a little bit. You know, Lion is my first novel. I wrote that. I think everyone says this about their first book, but it took 50 years to write. Like, that was an egg that took a long time to hatch. But the actual writing of it took maybe 2.5 years. Wifehouse I wrote incredibly quickly. I wrote Wife in about 8 months. I had the vision. I conceived of it. I knew it began with a Christmas lunch and it ended with a Christmas lunch. I knew it was a year, and I knew it was this panoply of voices. And I had the sketch of it quite early. So when you asked me to do this, and by the way, I just love, this is so my jam, just to get forensic about words. And when I say it's a treat, yeah, it really is, because this is like, I live for. This was the passage I didn't have to reach for this at all. This was the passage because I worked this one. I really did. I knew it was a touchstone for this book. And so I really wanted to land the plane, or even the helicopter, to be even more precise, you know, on this tiny little patch of land. You know, it's a story I heard on a podcast. And in that way where when you're writing, everything is in, you're just constantly like, oh my God, I can't believe that is helping me with my novel. And of course, to somebody else, it's just a fucking podcast story. But, you know, you're like, everything is conspiring for me. It's very solipsistic when you're a novelist, it turns out. But I pulled over. I remember hearing this podcast. I think I was I think I can even remember where I was. And I left myself a voice memo about it. I couldn't tell you what it was on or what anything, not a clue. It may have been a radio show even, but I love voice memos. And so I did that and got home thinking, I don't know what this is. I don't know why this matters, but I really, really know that this matters. And I told my husband the story at dinner, and I told it with a laugh. I told the story of, so crazy. Can you believe this woman spent 8 hours looking for herself? Isn't that nuts? And then I think there were other people at dinner. And as I told the story, I think this happens to all of us, right? You don't know what you think until you hear yourself say it. And as I found myself articulating the story, I was like, and here is why it lives in this book is, what if she hadn't owned herself? And that is actually what the core of this book is about, is can you own who you are? And at what cost does it take to own who you are? That's the germ of how that story got in there. On a more sort of practical level, it was very hard to actually just tell the story of this, in a way that was clear, in a way where you understood that it was this woman sitting in this seat who changed her clothes and then went out and looked for herself. To actually, weirdly, I mean, now, of course, I say it and I'm like, what was the problem there? I couldn't find a way to tell it where I believed that you, the reader, understood what was happening. And you had to understand what was happening in order to get the joke and then subvert it with her dark take on it.
And I think that the other thing that this passage pulls off that I imagine would be difficult to do is that as the reader is reading the story about what happened in Iceland, that it's kind of dawning on them at the same time that it might be dawning on the character that this could be a metaphor. And I imagine that doing that in 200 or 300 words or whatever this is very hard to do. It's the kind of thing that can spiral out of control, turn into 1,000 words.
You're totally right. It's, as always, it's allowing enough time to elapse that you're not, because you could tell that story in one line. A woman changes clothes and then looks for herself in Iceland. Like anything, right? You can tell it however you want. But there's a contracted version of that, as you rightly say, doesn't allow the reader to go on the ride with her of experiencing the sort of lulling sound of a podcast and the way a host will spin it out and then get to his juicy little punchline. I added the idea of, the police were deployed, the fire trucks were deployed, but to stretch it, to just stretch it out. I also wanted to include this landscape. I Googled tundra and looked at images of it, and it mattered to me that there was something, that there was nowhere for her to hide in this landscape. Yeah. There isn't a tree. There isn't a forest. There is nothing. So the mystery of where this missing passenger could be is exacerbated, right? But it's also, for the metaphor that there is nowhere to go. There is only the silhouette of possibly this woman disappearing into the distance. But again, I don't want to ever get hung up on a detail that isn't absolutely germane to the story that I'm telling. And I love adjectives. I love description. So I think, like all writers, I'm always like, but do I need it? But is it essential to this? And, that's what I think, the lose your darlings phrase is actually really about is, I could bejewel and bedazzle many a paragraph, but is it in service of what it is that I'm writing about? Right. I have this for both Lion and Wifehouse, and it's sort of emerging for book 3. I try and distill as I'm writing. I try and write into a question that then the book is in answer to. And I often don't have the question from day one. As I say, I have to sort of write into it to arrive at it, so that then that question informs every edit that comes afterwards.
Wow, that's a really interesting way of putting it. Can you give us an example, like with this book? What is the question you came to?
So when I came to Wifehouse and had this framework and knew I wanted to write a story about a mother who left, I wanted to write to a question. And the question was, what makes a woman leave? Why would Why would a woman leave her children?
Yeah.
And so that allowed to hold an enormous amount of information about, I knew I needed Annie's backstory. I knew I needed her childhood in there. But I also knew then that I didn't really need all her ex-boyfriends. I didn't really need, I needed the things the beads that could be threaded onto that particular piece of string and nothing more.
Is the question the thing that unlocks your ability to start writing? Where in the creative process for you do you arrive at, this is the question that this book is going to try to tackle? Or do you start writing and you're halfway through the book before you arrive at the question, and then you go back and you say, now that I know the question, all of this is so much simpler and I know what to do now?
I think, yes, that one. I think I feel like I begin with like this enormous log of wood that I'm just trying to hurl across a space. If with luck and time and dedication, it might finesse itself into an arrow by the time I'm done. And then I will go back and then keep throwing that arrow and, sort of trying to whittle away then what may have extraneously be there. What I realize is I have to write, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, I have to write an enormous amount in order to arrive at the kind of distilled storytelling that I like and want to read and want to create.
How did you come up with that vice of question and answer?
I've never studied anything about writing. I mean, I've studied English literature at Oxford, so we'll call that an amazing education, and I have read nonstop my whole life. But I've never done an MFA, and I'm actually very glad that I haven't. I think I feel grateful to feel very unencumbered by rules, regulations. So much of what I do is informed by what I have done for the last 35 years, which is acting. To prepare a script is you should see my scripts. They're just nothing but questions all the way around. What was she doing before this moment? Before the cameras start rolling, what's the moment before? What happens afterwards? Why is she crossing the room? Why is she holding a cup? What's in the cup? I'm constantly interrogating a script and hoping to answer it with my performance. So I think probably in a completely sort of inchoate way, that's where it came from.
And was that something that you picked up from someone, or when you started acting, it was just, I can't act until I've answered these questions for myself?
I think every actor does this to some degree. Totally. I am certainly not unique in interrogating a script. I've also written enough scripts, myself too, to know that a script is a haiku. It is the most distilled form. And what's there on the page is a reduction, a jus of a giant stockpot. So your job as the actor, in my version, is to somehow deduce what else didn't make it in because of time, because of constraints, because of the necessities of the scene. But the ghost of all those previous drafts has to be in you, because it can't be on the page, or the script would be 60 hours long. You have to, in my sort of ideal version, you're bringing the novel to speak through the haiku. That's your job, is to inhabit it with the fullness that you possibly can.
What did previous versions of this passage look like? How were they different from the one that ended up in the book?
I wish I had a fuller answer to this. We lost our home in the Palisades fire last year, which meant that I lost, and I handwrite the first draft of everything. So I no longer have the first draft of Wifehouse or Lion. Thank God I grabbed my laptop, so the book exists. And I'm also, so that's what I don't have. No idea. And then I also, and this is a habit my husband is trying to cure me of. He's a scriptwriter and a playwright. I overwrite, meaning I come to the page and then I just rewrite the thing. And I don't save previous drafts, ever.
Yeah.
I think because in my arrogance or whatever, I just firmly believe that whatever I'm going to come up with next is going to be better. If I if I cut something and I'm like, I don't know about that, I might want that after all, or that's backstory that maybe I'll thread in at a later point, then I open another Word doc and I just have a dumping ground for excisions that are sort of borderline, maybe interesting later.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm rewriting, I'm ruthless. I'm absolutely ruthless. I will just dispense and throw out and the whole thing. What I can tell you is this passage got reworked extensively on just a word by word level.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go looking for the segment that you had originally listened to?
No.
Did you ever wonder, like, it obviously held your attention and you immediately found something, and I wonder either if you, in moments of I can't get this right, I wonder how they did it because they must have done something right, or if you were like, I don't want to do it how they
It's such a good question. It would be really interesting to Google. I would say no, I didn't, but my memory is horrendous. So it's entirely possible that I did and that you'll find it like there's a verbatim quote and I'll be like, horrified. So I'll say maybe. I don't remember doing that. I am not, as this is a bone of contention in my house, I have no great reverence for facts at all.
Well, you're a novelist, so.
I'm a novelist. I, as far as I'm concerned, everything, the whole world out there is fiction. It's either all fiction or it's all autobiography. It's one or the other. But I hold facts very, very lightly. Again, to my husband's dismay when I'm telling a story and he's like, that's literally not what happened. Like, well, it's a better story, so we're going to go with it.
But I love the idea that you can just hear something and then at a certain point, it doesn't really matter if you remember it exactly the way that it was. All that really matters is how you hold it and how you want to use it as a novelist.
I think that's right. I also think there is a cost to being a storyteller and telling potentially other people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that my third book is actually about. I think there is I think of them as like cobwebs. They're just things you walk through and then they land on you and maybe you make something else with it. But people feel very proprietorial about stories and events. And so I think storytelling is as fundamental as breathing to us. Or I'll speak, it is to me. I don't do well if I'm not engaged in storytelling of some kind. And I think maybe that makes me ravenous. I think maybe it makes me like, I'll take yours and I'll take yours and I'll take yours and I'll take mine. And then I feel a little surprised when somebody's like, but that was mine. I'm like, aren't they ours? Isn't this what we're doing? Isn't it all ours? Like, have mine, right? Write my crazy dad if you want. Like, you know?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading your book and which I kind of alluded to in my little intro is how much of this is pulled from people close to you or maybe people you've met in your career, because there's an actor in the book and the acting stuff feels extremely true to life and really could kind of only be written by somebody who's been behind the scenes for so long. It's not an autobiographical book in the way that your first book was. It's to be these things that are just sort of, collected and...
It's the actor in me, but they're all me.
Right.
All me. Like, it's a bit like when you dream and you have a nurse and a doctor and a dead patient and a headless chicken. They're all you. They're all your unconscious just up to grab your attention. And so I am as much Hector as Annie, as Candace, as Vita,
Sonya, how do you know when you've gotten it right? Because you sort of talk about the many iterations of this passage, or even just trying to inhabit different characters and bringing a little bit of yourself into each of them. So during your process, when do you know you've got it? When do you know that you're done or that you've arrived at whatever it is that you were really shooting for?
I think it's the sound of it. I don't write to read aloud, but there is some part of me that is always reading it aloud. And there's a rhythm that I want, or I want it to be a lull, and then I want urgency that's just tidal. You just know it. The last paragraph of this book, I wrote in one sitting and I never touched a word of it again. Like that, just to offer a contrast, right? I wrote it and I was like, that's it. That's done. I landed the plane. Like I don't touch a comma of that. You pray for those. Those are few and far between those moments. It's like being an actor where you're like, oh my God, I actually was the thing. I did the thing. And like I can count on one hand the number of times that's happened. And it's a great, great feeling, but you know it. You know it. And I feel, you know, there's an odd confidence that I have about my writing that I've never had as an actor, particularly, that I feel much more, not insecure. I've done it a very long time, but I feel it feels more nebulous an art to me, more just hurling gravel and hoping something gets wedged in the thing. Like reading to me, good writing, it feels just unequivocal to me. I just know what it is. I think we all do. I know what it sounds like. I know what I want to read.
As a reader and a writer.
Yeah. I mean, I hold the bar really, really high. I mean, this is part of the reason it's taken me so long to start writing. I have felt so daunted and so unwilling to write a bad book that I was like, I just don't want to add to the bad books. And so I will only write a book that I would want to read, and a book that I think doesn't exist yet. That's a sort of useful check-in point, right? Is like, but have we covered this?
Mm-hmm.
And I did, again, it's the actor in me. I'm a research junkie, and I just love bringing all this stuff to a role. And then invariably you arrive with all this clobber, and they're like, yeah, if you could just use 1 teaspoon of that would be great. Again, it's my thing of like, write the novel in order to sing the haiku. Like that's how it goes. So Wifehouse, I did an enormous amount of reading. For the time that I was building up to it and then writing it, I really, really only read books about adultery. I just, from fiction to non, from Esther Perel to Anna Karenina to The Real Thing of Tom Stoppard to The Awakening, you name it, from the classics to A Doll's House. Like I read them.
To get what?
I wanted to see how women have been treated who've left, women who leave. I like sort of touching the edges. I like knowing the terrain that I'm in order to make sure I'm not accidentally recovering old ground.
Yeah.
And All Fours came out while my book had been picked up and was ripping, and I read All Fours with like such trepidation, being like, oh my God, my book, is it accidentally already in the world? And I read it and I was like, oh no, it's wonderful, it's delightful, it's invigorating, and it's absolutely not my book.
Yeah.
Of course we're not. We're myriad human beings. Who could possibly write the same book? But I have such a horror of sort of derivative or cliche or whatever, and I didn't feel Wifehouse existed. I didn't feel that there was a version.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I feel like I would do the exact opposite. I would not want to read anything that has been written about the subject of my book. Otherwise, I would be, I don't know,
You talk
worried that I
yourself
would
out of writing it?
talk myself out of writing it, for one thing, or I would accidentally use something that, I don't know, that seems scary to me. Seems much scarier than what I would do, what you described doing.
I think
But it makes a lot of sense.
the joy of having a terrible memory is you just live. It's highly unlikely I've written down anything anyone else has written because I wouldn't remember it. But I just pour it. I like to bathe in it, and I like to be in that miasma while I'm cooking that.
What did you learn from the first book that you brought to Wifehouse?
It's so hard to say. I mean, again, now I'm in book 3. I'm like, God.
In terms of sort of process, like the sitting down and writing.
I guess I learned something. So I learned that I write longhand.
That is really interesting too.
Journaler, and I've journaled my whole life. And so moving my hand across a page, I associate with very unfettered, very unfiltered, unedited storytelling, or just getting things down. And so I'm uninhibited is the word I'm after. It just pours out. And that's what you want, or what I want for a first draft. I want what Anne Lamott calls the vomit draft. I just want I want that in there. That's the first draft. And with Lion, it was distilled from many journals. And so over years and years, so I went back to my old journals and sort of harvested them, if you will, and then typed up little bits, sometimes just a line or a memory, and then worked all of that in a Word document into something bigger without having any sense of how these pieces were going to fit together. That was the real piece.
Yeah.
The real thing to find. And what I found, what unlocked book 1 was discovering that if I wrote it all in the present tense, in a continual present, so each chapter begins, I am 12, I am 35, I am 7. They're not each chapter, actually. Sometimes it's a paragraph, and sometimes I am 12 and I am 37 happen right after one another. And arranging it more thematically than chronologically. But the perpetual present really unlocked the book, because that was it mirrored thematically what the book is about.
Right.
So that was a thing that I had where I was like, oh, I get it. That was what works. And then I come to book 2 and I'm like, nope, it's not that key. What's the key? What's the key to this one? I don't know what the key to this one is. It's a bit like having all the same gear, I guess, if you're a rock climber or something, and then you scale K2 and then it's a new mountain and you're like, I don't know how to get up it. I have all the same gear and I don't know how to get up it.
Right. Each book is
falling
very
back on the same habits of just going back to the page, scrolling. I actually wrote the whole of Wifehouse longhand and then used bits and pieces of it. But there's a ton that didn't make it into that was in the first. And book 3, I've written the entire book longhand and I haven't used a word of it. And it's like I had to get it out of me. I had to know that I had done it. And now I'm on the page and crafting it in a very different way.
So what was hard in Wifehouse? What were the writing challenges?
Definitely 2 that immediately spring to mind are braiding in Annie's backstory in a way that wasn't boring and annoying. I hate it when I'm in full flow and then the author is dragging me back and you're like, dude, but she was about to have sex. Can she just have sex? So, and really having to sort of put it in and then walk away sometimes for weeks so that I could come back with fresh eyes and be like, it slows down here. It slows down. Rip it out. Find a new way, or do you need it? Is it germane to the question, why would a woman leave her children? And having to sort of get really rigorous and ruthless about that. So that was a thing, because I had all this backstory. I had tons and tons and tons. I knew everything about Annie and her education. Again, it's the actor in me that wants to know all of that. And so I have to I have to know all of that, but you don't, to my mind. And so working out where that could piece in, and that maybe a flight home back from Australia was a good moment to sort of cogitate and think about and allow those sort of memories to surface in a way that felt organic to the story rather than me imposing it in the middle of a dinner party. I didn't want that. The backstory was that structurally was a thing. And then finding Annie was that took multiple passes of really, I would do a pass every time for each character where I would just Hector and I'd just do Candace and ignore everyone. And if I noticed something else on the way, I would have a scratch pad beside me so that I would note it down, but not get distracted by that one. So
you really treat them as individual sort of stories within themselves. Like you're making me think that more actors should write novels. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like asking a fish what water's like. Like I don't know any other way of doing it. I do feel like how is anyone writing a book who hasn't acted? I mean,
I'm asking myself the same question now.
Again, I think, having talked to a few other writers, I think what it gives me is I'm not frightened of dialogue. I really enjoy it. And I have a really innate sense of when it's time for dialogue. And like I say, I love a lush paragraph. I can sit and describe the forest to you all day long, but I won't. It's punctuating that with dialogue that feels like the way people actually talk and don't necessarily talk sequentially and pick up a thing that was said 6 lines later and have non sequiturs. And, I'm as I say, I'm married to a wonderful scriptwriter who's also a playwright by training. And, he's read my scripts for years and I've read his. I feel like I'm really grateful for that sort of training in really distilling something pithy into dialogue, or not have, either have it, let it work really hard, or don't have it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Speaking with other writers, how often do you find that there's a lot of similarities in your process? And how often do you think, oh, wow, I'm the only one doing it this way?
I don't know enough other writers, is the truth. I live in LA. This is not a town famed for its novelists. I feel slightly like a flamingo in a park of, I don't know, rhinos. I crave the community, honestly. I really do. Lion just got shortlisted for a literary award, so I was in Toronto and with other novelists, and I felt like an only child who's suddenly like released into a birthday party. I was like, hi, let's talk everything. And was completely overexcited to talk process with people that I'd met about 15 seconds earlier. So I really need to like chill out.
Did you learn anything interesting from those initial conversations?
I did. I mean, there's so much overlap, and then there's so much where everyone just parts ways and does their own thing. You know, I do voice memos a lot. I walk an enormous amount. It turns out other writers also go for big walks. I will often go for a walk with a question in my head, and I will articulate it to myself so that the walk has some purpose. So it'll be like, how are we getting out of that paragraph? Or does she have to go to the party? What's happening at the party? So that I'm not just in general mode of like, oh, this book's shit and I'm never going to finish it. Like I try and questions I find really helpful, clearly. So
is that a mode that you can get into of thinking the book is shitty?
Yes.
Yeah.
What? Yes. Are we humans? Yes. Of course.
I think just about every writer that we've spoken to has a similar mode.
Yeah. I'm just making sure though.
You know, 1,000%. Like I'm constantly. I mean, God, the variables are so huge. I hadn't written for a little bit recently. I started work on a new TV show, so I'm constantly commuting to Vancouver. And you know, the promise to myself had been I'll write on the plane because I love writing on planes. I find it very focusing. And but you know, predictably, I haven't been writing that much on planes because I've just so much else going on and things happening. And so I eventually the other day, coming back from Toronto, popped open the laptop and reread what I've written of book 3 and sat there sort of near tears. I mean, couldn't get off that plane fast enough to ring Davey and be like, this is unreadable. It's absolute drivel. And he was like, maybe you need some sleep. And I was like, nope, don't need sleep. I should just throw this laptop in the trash. And then did get sleep, which was much, much needed, and some food.
Yeah.
Read it the next day and was like, all right, some stuff in here that works. We can salvage some of them. We need to throw all of it in the trash.
James Salter, the novelist, has a great line in one of his books where he says that he says something like the pages turn bad overnight or turn sour overnight. And I think about that all the time. Like how often you write something that feels really good and then you look at it the next day and you're like, oh God, that is just terrible.
I have to tell you, because he's my hero, and I met him because I adapted one of his short stories for a screenplay. He wrote this beautiful collection of short stories last night. I've lost track how many people I've given that book to. And I adapted the title story and went to Amagansett and met him.
Wow.
And sat, you know, and it's one of the heartbreaks of the fires. He wrote me a beautiful letter.
Oh.
But yes, isn't he the best? Isn't he the best? I know no one who writes a better sentence. No one.
Yeah. Well, this is a good segue to our question that we ask all the writers who we have on, which is if you could have somebody on a show or a show like it talking about their own process, who would it be?
James Salter. That would have been
Salter?
Yes, we'd have got there anyway. Yes, no question.
Let's do some rapid fire, Jon, to close things up.
What's one aspect of writing you think you're particularly good at?
Dialogue.
And what's that one aspect of writing you think you're particularly bad at?
Golly, so many. Backstory.
What's harder to write, the first line or the last line?
First line.
What's the first thing you edit out of a draft?
Backstory.
What's a word that you always misspell that autocorrect saves you from?
Good one. I don't know. I'm quite good at spelling, but
That's a British education thing, I must say.
I think so. I don't mean to sound marvelous. Nothing is coming to mind, but
you'll notice from this point on.
Now I will, and then I'll send you.
Yeah, let us know.
How many titles did Wifehouse go through before landing on the final? And if it went through any good ones, do you have any to share?
Wifehouse was a struggle to find. Both books. I don't write to a title. Title comes right at the very, very end, and I work with real faith that the title will come. Wifehouse is a nod to A Doll's House and also an inversion of Housewife. So when I got it I was like, yeah, that's it. So I didn't really have any others. I just didn't have anything at all until I had Wifehouse.
Had you written the section in the book where the word appears and then you found it later as a title?
No, I went back and
You went
added.
back. Okay.
Yeah.
You already said you write longhand. Do you then go into Google Docs, Microsoft Word? What's your word processor of choice?
Because I'm Mac and I'm sort of functionally illiterate when it comes to computers. It's essentially a glamorous typewriter for me. I have absolutely no idea what any of this does. So I just, when I started writing, because I didn't know any better, just wrote in Pages because that's what Mac offered, until my lit agent just wept and was like, this has to stop. Like, this madness must end.
Yeah.
So now I have to stop myself reflectively opening Pages because it's such habit. So no, I write in Microsoft Word and I hope for the best.
When you're writing, do you have music, podcast, TV on in the background? Do you listen to silence?
Noise cancelling headphones, and everything is on Do Not Disturb, apart from the kids' schools. And I occasionally, there's an app called Endel, I don't know how you pronounce it. And they do sort of strange, focusy, slightly hypnotic beat music. I mean, I guess to the uninitiated, it could sound like club music, maybe, but it's quite slowed down. Anyway, they have gold stars and medals from NASA that this is what has been proved to actually help with synchronized brainwaves to sound. So when I'm in like real focus and I'm like, we're in distillation mode, not for creating mode, but when we're in full editing mode, I will do a timed thing on Endel and do like a 45-minute session. And there is something about, maybe Pavlovian, who knows, they could whistle and I'd do it. But it does something to me that definitely gets me on the page. But otherwise, no, silence, complete silence.
That sounds really interesting. I have to look up just to hear what that sounds like now.
Yeah.
My husband's like, what is happening? What is this? Why are we in a fight?
What's your go-to procrastination method?
Absolutely anything. I mean, I can make a chore out of anything.
Any excuse to get away from the page.
Just leave me with it. Like 100%. My child's socks need pairing properly.
Yeah.
The big one is cooking. I really love cooking. And so, and I can absolutely convince myself that a chicken pot pie is worthy of my attention and what needs making at 3 p.m.
Needs to happen right now.
Totally. And it's sort of bulletproof because you're like, I'm making food for the family. What?
Right.
So cooking is probably that.
But you're a very busy person. Do you write every day? Do you try to write? What's the schedule like that you try to hit?
I aim for every day, but I am very generous with myself about what that looks like. So it can be a journal entry. It really can be. It can be a line of, I'm here, I'm tired, and I don't want to write.
There's no word count.
There's no word count. Not at this stage.
Yeah.
I have been very gentle with myself since the fire. I really have, for so many reasons.
Yeah.
We're now 18 months on, so the trauma is to some extent, subsided, or as far as it will. And now it's more about just finding routines in this sort of endless succession of rental houses that we've been in. I've never been a writer who just grabbed her laptop and hopped off to the coffee shop. I have really loved my little burrow that I had. Yeah. And so reinventing that every time we move.
Tough, yeah.
Just takes a minute. And so my deal with myself was just gentle. You put 2 books out in 2 years. That's great. And the third will come, but it'll come in a different way than the other 2 did.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier writing on planes though, Sonya, and that I would not put at the top of most relaxing places to really get the creative juices flowing.
I find it wonderful. I make it a real rule for myself that I don't buy the Wi-Fi. I try never, ever to break that rule unless there's some emergency on the ground. But I just don't do it. I can't cook on a plane. I can't tidy on a plane.
You can't leave.
There's nothing else to do. You're trapped.
And it's largely quiet if I put those damn headphones on. Yeah. And someone's going to bring me food every now and then. I mean, honestly, I've said this before. Like, if ever I had a deadline, I would buy myself a round the world ticket and knock that puppy out, because that is it's sort of, the sensory deprivation of it, I find amazing. Now, is it my most creative place? I don't know, but it seems to work. Something's happening up there.
That's Sonya. That's all our questions.
Wonderful.
It's been really fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
on.
so much. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's so fun to talk to people about, on a word level about what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sonya.
Thank you.